A Huff and a Puff by David A. Miller. Hello everybody, meet Largo. He's a humongous dragon, but not the scary type. He has a big silly smile on his face at all times and a long nose with huge nostrils. He also has a big belly from eating lots of cakes. He's a very interesting dragon. He knows lots of things about a lot of stuff, like how long is a piece of string, or what can you do if you have a rash? He even knew when it was time to go to bed. Once upon a time, there were lots of dragons, all different kinds. Tall ones, short ones, long ones. Some were even invisible here on the island of Sophia. Did you know that Sophia means wisdom in Greek? It was named that because the dragons living there, who knew so many things. People would come from across the world to get answers to questions they had. But now Largo was the only dragon left. All of the others flew away, one by one, but people still came to the island in their hundreds by boats or planes. Every morning, Largo would start his day the same way. First, he would wake up and stretch his big wings, scratch his big belly, and turn off his alarm clock. At the same time, the people in the village below would be waking up too. In the distance, he could hear kettles boiling and front doors shutting as everybody went off to work. Largo had a very important job to do. That was to go and greet all the visitors to the island that had just gotten off the boat. Then he would go to the rock in the middle of the town centre, where there were fresh cakes from the baker and fish from the fisherman and a comfy blanket from the seamstress every morning. From his rock, Largo could see the whole town and all its visitors. Everybody seemed so happy. People were shopping. There was even a band playing music by the water fountain. As Largo sat there, a small girl walked up to his rock and said, "How far away is the moon?" Largo smiled and said, 200,000 miles. The little girl was amazed. She said, "Thank you," and smiled, then walked off to her parents. As the day went on, Largo let out a big huff as he started to get bored. He had answered at least 20 questions so far that morning. Some were hard, like, why does the earth spin? And some were super simple, like, why are boys so annoying? And even a question about why this girl's dad had chest hair, but her mum didn't. So he stood up and let out a big puff. He said to the queue of people, "Goodbye." Everybody waved him off as Largo flew away. He soared over the town, then across the countryside towards his cave home. When Largo got home, he collapsed on his bed and thought to himself, it was so much easier when there were loads of us dragons answering all these questions. It is so boring. Haven't they heard of Google? Then he scratched his belly and said to himself, what would happen if I didn't greet the people who came to visit and didn't sit on the rock in the middle of town? They wouldn't even miss me, I'd bet. Bzzz, bzzz, his alarm went off. He didn't listen to it. He rolled over. Bzzz, bzzz, went the alarm clock again. This time he stretched his big claw and tapped snooze. Hours later, Largo woke up and started his day as normal. He stretched his wings, scratched his belly, and walked to the entrance of his cave. It was silent and weird. No whistling kettles or slamming doors. So off he flew to go and greet all the people. But nobody was there at the harbour, not even the boat. So he flew right to the town centre and landed on his rock. He looked around, but nobody was there. There were no fresh fish or cakes or even a comfy blanket to lay on. Largo looked around and then he huffed and he puffed before he flew away back home. The next day was Sunday. Again, there were no boats or tourists, not even a market. So Largo woke up as usual, stretched his wings, scratched his belly, and listened for the noises outside. Today he could hear giggling from some small children and the sound of lawnmowers. He thought to himself, what should I do today then? He could dust his cave or organise his log collection, or maybe he could go and see where that giggling was coming from. Largo flew out of his cave towards the sound of the giggles. When he found the children who were giggling, they said, "Hey Largo, where were you yesterday? We didn't see you on your rock." Largo smiled. He thought, they missed me. "I'm sorry, I slept in," he told them. The children all laughed and went back to playing. Largo joined them, but he kicked the ball a little bit too far, so he had to fly off and get it. While he was flying, he heard the fisherman and thought to himself, maybe I should go visit him. So after returning the children's ball, off he flew. He whooshed over to the fisherman. As he flew, he saw the fisherman folding the nets really carefully, so he gently landed next to him. The fisherman turned to Largo and said, "Hey, Largo, are you feeling better now? I was worried about you when you didn't fly over and greet the tourists yesterday." Largo thought to himself, he was worried about me, so he did notice me. "I slept in," Largo explained, and they both laughed. Largo lifted the nets up high so all the water would drain off. In the distance, Largo could see the baker, so he decided to go see her next. When Largo saw the baker, she was riding a bike delivering bread for people's lunches. Largo flew alongside her and she turned to him smiling. "Oh, Largo, it's you! I wanted to ask you if you knew a better way to fold these tissues, but you weren't there on your rock yesterday." Largo smiled and thought to himself, she did notice I wasn't there. Largo asked her, "Have you tried to fold them this way?" And the baker turned to him and said, "I will try that, thank you." With that, the baker turned down a path, shouting, "Bye, Largo," as she cycled away. As Largo headed back towards his cave, he saw somebody jumping around and waving at him. It was the seamstress. She was holding a massive fluffy thing. When Largo sat down next to her, she said, "Largo, I made this for you. I was on my way up to the cave to give it to you, as I thought maybe you were cold and that's why you didn't come to your rock yesterday. It's a hooded jumper." Largo had a tear in his eye. He loved it. He thought to himself, she must have knitted all night to finish that jumper. Largo smiled and said, "Thank you so much," and the seamstress said to him, "You can wear it tomorrow when you come to relax on your rock." As Largo got back to his cave, he saw a huge stack of cards. Some said, "Get well soon," some said, "Missing you," and some just had pictures of funny animals on them. They all had lovely little messages on them. Some were from people Largo had never met before, like a girl from Spain named Louisa and a man from England named Steve. Largo was so happy. He'd thought the people only wanted him when they wanted a question answered, but now he knew people really did care and he couldn't wait to get back to his rock tomorrow. The very next morning, when Largo's alarm clock went off, he reached out his giant claw and turned off his alarm. He got up and stretched his giant wings and scratched his giant belly. He took 2 steps to the edge of his cave and he got his toes wet. Oh no! It was pouring down with rain, and Largo knew that when it rained, the town centre wasn't open. There was no baker baking or fisherman out fishing. The visitors didn't visit and the band wouldn't play music. What can I do now? Thought Largo. The only thing Largo could see was puddles everywhere. Largo paced up and down his cave as the rain drizzled down outside. He watched the clock go round and round. He thought to himself, why did it have to rain today? Why didn't it rain yesterday when I had nothing to do? And he huffed, and just then a large rain blob trickled down the cave entrance, crossed the ceiling, and blopped onto his nose. He let out a mighty puff sound. Largo gave up pacing up and down his cave. He decided he would just have to accept that today was a rainy day, and that meant he would have to find things to do. He picked up a book and started to read. Minutes later, he was finished reading. Now what to do? He huffed and he puffed, and then he thought to himself, I have an idea. On his shelf was a puzzle of a lighthouse. He reached up and laid it out on his bed. It wasn't a very big puzzle, but he liked it nevertheless. Largo placed one piece, then another piece, then a third piece, quickly followed by the fourth piece. The fifth piece took him a little longer, but the sixth piece fell into place in the blink of an eye. Finished. Largo quickly put the puzzle away, expecting the rain to surely have stopped by now. To his disappointment, it was still raining. He huffed and he puffed. What should I do now? Largo looked around his room, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw his racing car. He got up and stomped over to his toy box. He rummaged around hunting for the remote control. But no, it wasn't there. So he looked behind the box and then under his bed. Nope, not there either. I give up, he thought, and he stomped back over to his bed. When Largo sat back down on his bed, he huffed and puffed again. Now what to do? I'm so bored. I just want to go see my friends and see if there are visitors to the island. What I wouldn't do for a question to answer right now. If only it wasn't raining, I would have a lovely blanket to lay on and fresh cakes and fish to eat. Suddenly Largo could feel a warm feeling on his back. It was the sun. Largo turned and jumped with joy. Yeah! He ran out the door and did a little boogie. He flew around the island as he did every morning, and just like every morning, everybody who saw him smiled and did big waves back. The fisherman threw him a giant fish from the sea. The baker tossed him a long stick of bread. Largo was so happy to see all his friends when he landed on his rock in the middle of town. And there it was, a comfy blanket for him to sit on too. The seamstress came over to Largo and said, "How is the jumper? Does it fit nicely?" Largo gave a big grin back to her and said, "Like a glove," and she walked away singing. And so as Largo sat there on his rock in the centre of town feeling happy, he gave his belly a little scratch. Just then a short bald man stood in front of Largo and said, "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course," Largo said. "Well, all my brothers have full heads of hair, but not me. I'm balder than bald. Why?" Largo said, "That's a very good question." He went on to explain to the man why he was the way he was, and the man said, "Ah, that makes sense." And then he said, "Thank you too, Largo." And both of them felt very happy. Largo because he'd been asked a question, and the man because he had found the answer to one. And so as Largo sat there on his rock, he noticed how nice everything had turned out, and he thought to himself, "I will never huff and puff again." The end.
Thank you for reading with Storyberries.com. Free stories for kids.